Hi, my name's Dave, and welcome to the San Diego chapter of the Progressive Democrats of America, California. Tonight, we have three things on our agenda. We're going to be talking about and getting hellos and shout outs from our endorsees that we endorsed in our lack of a meeting last month. We went with an endorsee thon via our email list, and because that's what we are, we're an email list, we're not a club. And then also we have Michael Vu going to be joining us and talking about what a strange trip our ballots are going to have during this coming election. And he'll talk about how the registrar of voters and how the Secretary of State is going to do their best to protect our votes. And then following Michael Vu, we'll have a chance to listen to Marjorie Cohn, Professor Emeritus Marjorie Cohn, who will let us know what we can do if Trump decides not to leave if he loses the election.
Can I say something?
So that's what we have going on.
Okay, there's the gallery view over here.
Yeah, and as I understand it, Dave, she's also going to talk about if there are any options to keep him from getting in a lawful Supreme Court justice.
All right. All right.
So we have 30 people or 35 people that said they would join us. So maybe we should give them a couple more minutes.
You can mute us here.
Why don't you run the thing?
All righty.
Well, that's David Wright. He's taken over from Michael Lopoy.
Hi, Jerry. Good to see you.
Hello there.
There he is.
Are we starting?
We're going to wait for a couple more people.
Okay.
I figured we'd start at and we'd start with letting our endorsees do a little talking.
Did you hear Bernie today?
If you need to get off right away and get on to another meeting, please raise your hand now.
What did he say?
He said if you're an endorsed candidate and have to go to another meeting and need to get off quickly, raise your hand now.
All right, I got Joe. Hi, Joe.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, thank you for the invite and the endorsement. I'll be very quick. I'm Joe LaCalva. I'm running for San Diego City Council District 1. That's the Barbara Bree seat, who is not coming back for a second term. We're pretty energized. We just saw the fundraising report today. But the challenge we have is I'm the guy that's known up and down the district, good reputation, but he's going to have chamber money and building industry money behind him, which you're going to put out a lot of mailers, which, you know, in the COVID era, it's going to be even, I think, even more potentially effective. So we got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're having a good thing. I see Doug's here, so I was very honored that Tony Atkins has endorsed my campaign along with a lot of other good people, a lot of good environmental clubs. So if anybody's looking for any volunteer work here in the next few weeks, lit drop, phone banking, texting, I think Dave knows how to get a hold of me. I certainly appreciate the help. And again, thank you for your good work. And I'm sorry you can't stick around. Looks like you've got two really fantastic speakers here tonight. So
If you would please post your contact information in the chat.
Okay, we'll do that before I check out.
Before you check out, and then I'll repost it later. So the people who come on after you're gone will get a chance to see it as well.
Okay. Thank you, very kind of you, Dave. Good to see you, Mike Fowler, too. I haven't seen you in a while. So, and Joan, my gosh, a lot of good people here I haven't seen in a long time. So, all right, take care, and I'll put that in the chat before I check out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So if you want to speak, I'm speaking for Dave. I guess it's more out of habit. sorry. But if you are an endorsed candidate and would like to speak, raise your hand and we'll take you in order.
Okay, I see Liz, and then I see Raul, and then Tim, and then Doug, and then Greg.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for the endorsement. It meant a lot to us. I am Liz Lavertu, and I am the Democratic endorsed candidate for California State Assembly, District 71, which is East County, San Diego, and the southwest part of Riverside County. Our campaign since the hit of the pandemic in March has been focusing more on community outreach and how we can serve the community in their times of need. From March until June, maybe early July, we were reaching out to seniors who were living alone at home to let them know about COVID, how to keep themselves safe, and connect them with the resources that they need. When the county fell short of being able to provide what they needed, we stepped in and we delivered groceries, or we delivered bird seed so that they could see the birds, because that was the one thing that made them happy, or delivered them puzzles, to help keep them busy during those times that they weren't able to, connect socially with people that they usually did. Most recently, here in my community, we've been affected by the Valley Fire. From day one, when the fire started a few Saturdays ago, my team and I went out to see what the community needed. We were dropping off deliveries to multiple locations, multiple times a day. A lot of families who were evacuated weren't able to get the assistance from the Red Cross of the hotel programs, because they also rescued their small pets. Their cats and dogs and chickens and rabbits were with them. So they were staying at Steele Canyon High School, where my son goes to high school. So we would swing by there with ice, deliver propane to them, anything that they needed, coffee in the mornings, helped out, the San Diego Humane Society and the alert animal evacuation teams. And then once people started going home to their properties, that a lot of them were no longer standing, we stepped in again to help provide food resources to those families affected by food insecurities, because their power was shut off anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. Actually, some of them don't even have power still. But those that got their power restored, we were able to get them their perishables back by working with other nonprofit organizations in the area to connect them. So the Red Cross ended up sending those people to us. Like, we are really, this is really what an elected official should be doing. They should be on the ground in the community, finding out what the community needs and connecting them with those resources. Like, we need a leader in East County that cares about the community and cares about the people and is willing to get their hands dirty and work to make sure that everybody's needs are met. As I've been out, and as those of you who were on the call earlier know, there's definitely a lack of infrastructure all over the place, including our internet. Everybody should have access to to the internet. When I was down in the Barrett Lake area, kids are all huddled outside in 105-degree heat all around this closed down diner to get the Wi-Fi from them, because their Wi-Fi in their mobile home park is not strong enough to be able to connect to school for Zoom. So they're all sitting outside in the heat. I know I don't have enough time, but I am, right now what we need for this campaign is, of course, volunteers. We can use volunteers. I'm lucky to have Red to Blue organization working for me on my texting. So more so, I need people who can do things locally. No knock lit drops would be helpful. Also donations. We only need $20,000 more by October 5th to ensure that we can hit our whole texting campaign and get our persuadable voters, so that we can flip this district blue for the first time ever and get the first woman elected. So I hope you can join me and support our campaign and support our efforts that we have done thus far. And I'll put my contact information in the comment section in the chat bar. And if you guys want to get involved, please do so with myself or any of our local progressive candidates, because you know that progressives have a lot harder work ahead of them when they are campaigning. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your endorsement, and you guys have a great night.
Thank you, Liz.
Hey, Raul, before you go, I have some housekeeping to do. First of all, David, could you unshare your screen so we can actually see the speakers? Thank you very much. And Galaxy Tab A 2017, could you please change your name to your real name? Thank you very much. Back to David.
All righty. So Raul, you're up next.
Great. Thanks for everyone for having me. You could see I'm sitting in my car here because I'm out and about, and in District 7, dropping off signs, catching up with some people, picking up some donation checks, just getting around and being seen. Wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much for endorsing me. I've always loved going to the Sizzler and hearing what's going on. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore, but I miss all of you and just want to, just briefly give a few shout outs. Obviously, I'm first shout out really deserves to go to Joan. I send a lot of fundraising emails, and a person who always answers with even a little bit. She always gives generously, or even a little bit. She's always there for me. I really, really love you. Thank you so much for helping me out. I absolutely see it. Derek Cassidy making calls for me. It's people are coming out of the woodwork to help. So I'm really glad. We are in really good position right now. My team just went through all of we've finished texting our entire Democratic universe in the past week. And a lot of people, because they are registered Democrats, of course, we say we're, the Democrat. And a lot of Democrats say, well, is he progressive? Because those aren't the same thing. And, we know where the overlap is. We know where the disconnect is. But when I mention PDA-CA and the San Diego Democratic Progressive Club, Democratic Progressive Club, Progressive Democrats Club, it's been so long since we all went to Elijah's, right? People immediately are like, oh, really? Okay. So someone even made it so blatant as to say, are you a corporate Democrat? And I'm like, nah, bruh. So it's going really well. I'll just say that, it's funny. I never thought running for city council, a super PAC would be open to try to go after us. But, from the Lincoln Club, they got $140,000 in the last week. So that's cool. But we're doing strong. I gained from last report to this report $10,000 more in what do you call it, in cash on hand versus my opponent. He's completely stalled. He's got an office on Mission Gorge Road, and he's got 3 different consultants, and he's got a bunch of untested people being his door knockers. And I'm just looking at him saying they don't know how to really run a campaign. So big overhead, low quality. We're in really good position. Even if he has a little bit more money than us, we're going to be just fine. And those who are really excited about this, District 7, as of the September 1st registration advantage, voter registration advantage, is now over 15,000 more Democrats. So we are in really good position, and we're not going to let Noli say that he's unaffiliated with any party or that he supports, immigrant communities. It's like, well, no, you don't really. Quit pretending like you're, somehow middle of the road. We know who he is, and we're going to let people know. Anyway, thank you all very much for all your support going back into the, back before COVID. I'm really happy to see you all. If you want to join in a fundraiser, Democrats for Equality is hosting a fundraiser for me for my 33rd birthday. It's on October 2nd. My birthday is the 4th, but that's the best night we could get. And you can check it out on their Facebook page. I'm pretty sure Ryan Tribuco is going to post it really soon. We'd love to have you there. And thank you all very much for all you do. And Greg Robinson, I miss your speeches because you're the most important seat that nobody's ever heard of. Am I right? So there we go. I'll never forget your speech. And thanks, everyone, for all you're doing. Really appreciate you. And keep up the good fight. We're going to win.
Okay, I'm going to apologize now, and I'm going to bump Ben Huesa to the front of the line. So, Ben, please, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share some comments with you. I want to thank all of you for endorsing my campaign. This is going to be the winning campaign. We've been working very hard, building support every day, working hard to raise money, but it's been hard during COVID as people have been struggling. But we've definitely outraised our opponent enormously. She had to lend herself from her own personal money, or at least we think it's from her own it should be from her own personal money, an additional 20 on top of the 15,000 that she's lent herself so far, because she's not raising money. She's not really getting support of the most critical organizations that we need to win this campaign. So we're looking great. And I just want to thank all of you for supporting my campaign. It's, the difference is in this campaign is you can talk all you want and say you're for this and you're for that and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And the difference between my opponent and I is while she's talking about all the things she believes in, all the things she's going to do, we're actually doing those things. We've been fighting for the environment and getting success, passing SB 100, in which I helped write, in which I was a co-author, that's going to help make our economy and our energy completely from renewable sources. We have fought for the Tijuana River Valley successfully. We have stopped the flows of raw sewage into the ocean through our hard work. I'm the only elected official in the state that has run measures, bills, and that has worked to stop the flow in Tijuana River Valley. I've introduced bills to solve the problem. I've introduced bills to stop suicides from Coronado Bridge. I introduced bills in support of the environment, the Salton Sea, the Tijuana River Valley, the Otay Valley Regional Park. Lots and lots of work that we've done protecting the environment. Also helping our friends, our workers, protecting jobs, union jobs in California, growing the union jobs in California. Also fighting for women, making sure women have equal pay, making sure we stop sexual harassment in our state. While we're working hard to eliminate sexual harassment, my opponent has been creating an environment in the community college system that is unfriendly to people of color, especially African Americans. We have a USC report found that Southwestern College was one of the worst run community college districts in terms of providing a safe environment for women and for people of color. And one of those issues was a professor that was sexually harassing women, and the board sought to protect him, and they gave him a letter of recommendation to the next community college he went to. This is from a woman that claims she supports women, helping to promote and transition a predator of women to another college. So, you know, we have a great campaign. It's coming along, but I want to thank all of you for supporting me. And also, we need phone bankers. We have started our phone banking campaign. It's going very well. We need more people to add on. So any of you have any additional time, we'd love to have you join our campaign actively as a phone banker. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do. And thank you for all your hard work organizing these meetings and getting together and fighting the progressive agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we'll go to Tim Nader, please.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and it's good to see you. Thank you for your endorsement and your support. I'm Tim Nader. I am the Democratic endorsed candidate for judge. There is one judicial seat on the ballot this fall, and that is the one I'm running for. Everybody in the county votes on it, so wherever you are in San Diego County, you can vote for me. You can tell your friends to vote for me. I think even before the events of the past week, it was very clear in recent years that it matters who our judges are at every level. The passing of Justice Ginsburg and the further attempt to stack the court by the folks who run Washington right now is just one more step in that direction. But there has been an effort going on for a long time to stack the courts with judges who are not so interested in upholding the Constitution as they are in pursuing a particular ideology. It was extremely telling, for example, that after the cases came down last spring upholding LGBTQ rights and telling President Trump that he could not abolish the DACA program, some of the senators in Washington were complaining that their appointees had voted in the majority. And the complaint really boiled down to, how dare they follow the law and uphold the Constitution? We put them there to pursue our ideology. We don't need any more judges who are at risk to pursue that ideology. What we need are judges who listen to facts, decide cases on the evidence, and uphold our constitutional rights. I have a record from which you know that I'm going to do that. Whether it's climate change or COVID, I listen to the facts, facts that you don't necessarily hear in some parts of Washington right now. And it matters who our state Superior Court judges are. Superior Court judges are best known probably for hearing criminal cases. That's what people commonly think of when they think of our courts. But they also decide a wide variety of other cases. They decide family custody, child custody cases. They decide all kinds of civil disputes. The cases that were brought by Sierra Club and by the department I work for against Sandag and San Diego County, saying that their climate change plans were legally inadequate, that trial was heard and decided by a San Diego Superior Court judge, throwing out those climate action plans as being inadequate and telling them to go back and do it right. It really matters who our judges are, what they believe in, that they listen to facts and not to ideology or myth. So I need your help in this election. It is countywide. That makes it very expensive. It is way down ballot. That makes it tough to get attention. Folks' attention is understandably focused on other races right now, and those races are critically important, no question about it. But if you can donate anything, we're about $4,000 short of where we need to be. If you can help us with that, that would be great. I'll put information in the window. If you have time to volunteer, if you can take signs, anything you can do, let us know, and we will put time and money to good use and fill one more seat on our local court with a judge that you can count on to listen to facts and uphold the Constitution. Thank you again for your support.
All right, very good. Doug, would you like to speak for Tony, please?
Yes, I'm Doug Case. I am the Political Affairs Director for Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. She is keynoting a speech at another organization tonight, so she couldn't make it. So she asked me to stop by and express her appreciation for your endorsement of her campaign. I assume everybody here knows Tony. Tony is the first woman to have ever served as the leader, the Pro Tem of the Senate, the first LGBT person to serve in that role as well. Prior to that, she was the Speaker of the Assembly, the first Speaker from San Diego, and the first person in 150 years to have served as both the Speaker and the leader of the Senate. Prior to that, she was on the City Council, where she served for 8 years. And she has always, from the very beginning, been a grassroots candidate and elected official with strong progressive values. If I can give a brief legislative update, the legislature adjourned on August the 31st at midnight, and it was a chaotic session, to say the least. It was a short session because of COVID, and then they had to do a lot of their voting remotely. But anyway, I won't go into all the details, but it was chaotic. And but despite all that, they passed some significant measures to fight COVID-19, to spur economic recovery, and to respond to calls for greater economic and social justice. A couple of examples: the COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act was passed and was immediately sent to the governor as an urgent measure, and so went into effect immediately after the governor signed it. This protects tenants financially affected by COVID-19 from being evicted until February the 1st. Unfortunately, there were some bills that didn't make it through before the deadline, including Senator Bradford's Bill 731, which would have allowed the State Department of Justice to revoke the certification of police officers fired for misconduct or convicted of certain offenses. And the Senator's own Bill 1120, which would have allowed duplexes in single-family zones. And both of these bills will be reintroduced when the legislature reconvenes with a new legislature, with newly elected people in December. And finally, her signature bill this year was going to be a bill which helps communities combat sea level rise. They had to cut back on the number of bills they could consider because of the COVID situations. That bill also will be reintroduced in December. So thank you very much. And again, the Senator really appreciates the endorsement of this organization.
Thank you very much, Doug. Thank Senator Atkins for her fine work. And Greg Robinson, you're up next, please.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks so much to this organization for the endorsement. Any kind of Democratic endorsement means a lot. but it means so much more when it comes from progressives, because those are my values. So again, I'm Greg Robinson. I'm running for the County Board of Education. I am a lifelong Democrat, a lifelong teacher. I am the president of the Labor Democratic Club, and we're proud actually to have endorsed Tim Nader at our last meeting. And boy, I can't say how important we're getting Tim elected. Given what just happened with the Supreme Court, we need to build a wall around California, a legal wall with good jurists like Tim, because the stuff coming out of Washington is going to scare us all in the next few years. So Tim, thank God you're out there running for this race. Let me talk a little bit about my own by saying that and posing kind of a mystery. And the mystery is, why would anybody spend the kind of money that's going to be thrown into this no-name race? And right now, as best estimates go, any place between $750,000 and $1 million will be spent on a school board race, which nobody knows what the heck it does. It's usually confused with San Diego Unified. The key, I think, is the values that we're fighting for in education right now. Let me back up and just admit, oh my God, I don't know with you guys, but I am scared to death by what's happening in this country right now. The craziness that by day emanates from the White House. I mean, you know that line? You know, what's next to insanity? Mexico and Canada. And unfortunately, that is true. And that kind of insanity, that kind of rot is influencing all of our races and all of politics in the United States, even my little down ballot race. You know, there's an old saying that a fish rots from its head, and that rot is now spread even into school board races like this. And as I said, the struggle is around the values that underlie education, and specifically the struggle to keep public education public. The current incumbent, actually, I was incumbent before he defeated me here a few years ago, not because of what he did, but because of what a woman by the name of Alice Walton did. Name vaguely familiar to you, second or third richest woman on earth. Kind of money the old-fashioned way. She inherited, she's a Walmart nurse. She contributed $200,000, just one donation to his campaign. So this time around, it's easily going to be $750,000 to $1 million. Take a look at the values of this. This is the guy's incumbent, Mark Powell, a Republican, and not just any kind of Republican. These are the values. In the midst of Black Lives Matter, he writes an editorial in the San Diego Union that says what should be done around our schools? More police on campus. I'll put this connection in the chat because I responded to that. And it underlines the kind of values, because what I did was take a look at the research. I'm a sociologist. I've done research in education all my life, and I was horrified to think that anybody connected to education would think that the best solution is to criminalize adolescent behavior in our schools by putting cops there. Again, that's next to insanity. And then finally, just last meeting, I had some friends on that board from my time on it before, said, this guy also said, was talking about the current situation in the country and talked about the so-called pandemic. Oh my God, if we can't admit we're in the middle of the worst public health crisis, what the heck is going on? And that's the struggle. And that's why it's such an important struggle around education, around those values. And we can win this. All we need is a little bit of money. So if you could help out, that would be great. So thanks so much. But again, I need that endorsement. It's so important to me. And thank you again for all that help. And Greg Robinson, running for County Board of Education, District 1.
All right, thank you very much. And timing is perfect. I'm going to let Mike introduce our next speaker because he has a better relationship with him. I haven't met the man myself personally yet, so.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I've been getting in trouble with him for all this time, but Mike hasn't yet. I will say that Michael Vu, as you know, is the registrar of voters, and we've had him speak back when we were in the Sizzler. And he did a great job then and changed a lot of minds. At the time, people were kind of hesitant about Michael Vu. And it turns out that he's been a great registrar of voters, making a lot of great outreach. And also, I will add that this, just not to do with Michael Vu, but the Sizzler announced they went bankrupt yesterday. So I guess we won't be meeting there anymore or feeling bad about it. But today what we want Michael Vu, or what we're asking Michael Vu to talk about is the upcoming election and security and how we make sure that we know that our votes are counted and all the related things. I had the honor of actually being able to take a tour of the Registrar of Voters office during the primary and saw that they are doing incredible work. So Michael Vu, take it away.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's a pleasure, and I'm so glad we've had multiple interactions now, and individuals are getting to know the work that we're doing here at the Registrar of Voters office. It's not very often that people get to really see the back-end operations, and they surmise and they assume what's happening out there and project in, and it's really good for, like, example, like yourself, Mike, to really see the operations here. And I would invite everyone that's here on this Zoom chat and meeting to come to the Registrar of Voters when we're not necessarily within a pandemic. Certainly our office is always open to the public for observation anytime we are processing ballots and when we're in the full throes of an election. But it is a pleasure to join all of you in talking about this upcoming election, which is going to be so important on so many different fronts. And I'm sure you talked about all the importance of it, particularly with all the confluences of events that's happening in around our country these days. And it just seems like it's just one more item, one more event, one more activity that's just piling on top of one another, and it's all going to roost, as we move towards the voting process here relatively soon. In fact, I just want to let you know that we're already in the voting process. We actually sent out military and overseas ballots to the tune of 13,000 military and overseas ballots out last Friday and Saturday. We've already have hundreds of voted ballots back from our military and overseas voters. But let me go ahead and just kind of start really quickly and kind of give you a lay of the land about this upcoming election from kind of the by the numbers point of view, because they're frankly very impressive. In my 14 years that I've been here, we're approaching 1.9 million registered voters in our county that are registered to vote. That is kind of unheard of in terms of the total number of people that are just registering and voting or re-registering to the tune of 1.9 million registered voters. And so that's large. I've had to start changing my presentations whenever I give them out, because I was at 1.83 million just a few months ago, and then it popped up to 1.85, and then 1.86, and then 1.87, and now we're at 1.88 million registered voters that are out there. So I've just kind of got to the point of saying we're approaching 1.9 million registered voters that are out there. When you think about today is what is known for us as E-40, which is we are 40 days away from the election. And when you think about the 40th day prior to an election, that is a big milestone for our operations. And one of the reasons why is because we are now we've sent and delivered our local sample ballot and voter information guides to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of these through the U.S. Postal Service. And then we will complete that mailing every single day until they are sent out to registered voters. But the sample ballot and voter information guide, the local one, to the tune of 2 million of those are going to be sent out to our voters out there. Now, you may ask yourself, why are we sending out more sample ballot pamphlets than there are registered voters? Well, the reason why is because, as you may know, is we have 5 federally covered languages: English, Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So those additional language local sample ballot pamphlets are translated in these federally covered languages under the Voting Rights Act of 1965. When you think about this upcoming election, know that our staff at the Registrar of Voters office goes from a staff of 65 approximately permanent staff members And for this upcoming election, we'll balloon up to over 4,500 seasonal staff members that will be participating, and we will be hiring for the upcoming election. So it is, to really conduct the election to the magnitude that we need that many people. And when I talk about that number, keep in mind that now incorporates our poll workers, because we're changing the model of the election, which I will get into and frame that out appropriately here in just a little bit. When you think about this upcoming election and you think about the characteristics of the election, you all receive a ballot. It has your eligible contests on it. Know that there are 196 contests throughout the entire county. A little over 150 of those are offices that will be on the ballot across the entire county. And then you have 37 local measures as well as statewide propositions that will be on the ballot across the entire county. And so when you think about all the combinations of our county and the complexity, not just in sheer population, registered population size and geography, but when you think about the complexity of the county and the 430 political districts that we manage to here at the Registered Voters Office, in this upcoming election, there will be 842 ballot types. That is, you get one of the 842 ballot types that are out there in this upcoming election. And of course, we have to multiply that by the 5 languages that we support, because they all have to be translated. And that creates over 4,210 variations of the ballot that we have. And so this is to kind of give you an inside view, since you can't be here at the Registered Voters Office, is to get a kind of an inside look at all the operations that really we don't know about these characteristics until the 88th day after the candidate filing deadline, after the measure deadline occurs, before we actually get to really compile all this information, figure out which candidates will require, which contests will require an election, what measures will ultimately be on the ballot, and then proceed with it in quick fashion to get to this point of E40. So if you think about this, we didn't have 840, there will be 4,210 variations of that sample ballot pamphlet that is going to be mailed across the entire registered voters that we currently have. And we did that in a 44-day window, and we have to do that precisely because the sample ballot, the ballot that you will ultimately receive, is a sample of that, will be in that pamphlet that's out there. And of course, you all expect our office for us to be not only conducting accurately and with the utmost integrity, but precisely. And there's so many different moving parts that are occurring within our operations right now. And then when you think about this upcoming election, it's going to be a big one. There's no doubt in my mind that this election is going to be big. The largest turnout that we've ever had from a percentage perspective was an 84% turnout. And that was when? That was the 2008 presidential general election, which was the first Obama election. And then in the last presidential election, if we look backwards to the 2016 election, we had an 81.5% turnout. So when you think about the last 4 presidential general election, we have had on average a 79.5% turnout. When you're thinking about the size of our county and the population side, you would think that a county like of our size, that with that type of registered population, would be nowhere close to a 80% on average turnout, and yet we are always there. It kind of tells you the engagement level of our community and how robust it is in terms of its electoral health, is what I call it. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I can give you a ton more information and more numbers, and I probably will during the life of this, but I do want to share, if I can, my PowerPoint slide that I have to kind of frame out the upcoming election and the importance of it, and the security around these mail ballots, as well as any ballots that is cast in an election. So let me go ahead and do that. In 1 second here. Okay, I hope all of you can see this. So, as I mentioned, we're now faced with all these confluences of events. At top amongst all of the presidential election itself is the convergence of the pandemic and its impact on our operations. And so I really want to frame this out appropriately to all of you. And Mike, just stop me if we're running out of time. And I don't really, I think I've got what, about 20 minutes?
Well, you have till 8:30, which is
Okay, I got more time. Great.
Yeah,
Good.
you can go through virtually the whole deck here.
There's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to go quick. Please, if there's any questions that you may have, I would all just put them in the chat, and we'll probably go through them because there's a lot for me to dispense in terms of information out there about this upcoming election. So let me just kind of reel back the timelines here back to the March election, where we had the March presidential primary election on March 3rd. And if you recall that election, you know that we ran a polling place, neighborhood polling place election with 1,548 precincts. We had around 7,000 to 8,000 poll workers that served during that election. And we really conducted the election day without a hitch. We were able to facilitate that election. Voters either went to the polls or cast their mail ballots. Many more people voted their mail ballot. And we ultimately closed out election day with really no effect or impact associated with the pandemic itself. But if you, what you may not have seen is that shortly after that time frame, well, you were impacted most likely, is because the governor issued his executive order that asked everyone to shelter at home unless you were an essential worker. And for us, after the 2016 presidential general election, our office was deemed as a critical infrastructure. And sectors of the country that are deemed as critical infrastructures are like your power grid, your transportation system, just the waterways. All of those are considered critical infrastructures that in the eyes of the federal government are things that absolutely need to be maintained. Well, after the 2016 election, after the interference that was had, the federal government designated elections as a critical infrastructure, and what came with that was a level of additional monitoring that went on with that election. But for us, when the governor issued that executive order, we had to remain here. Why? Is because we were now in the depths, in the throes of what is known as the canvassing period, the 30-day certification period where we are reconciling everything that the poll workers did. We are verifying all the mail ballots that were timely cast and provisional ballots that were verifying all of those that were validated and then ultimately counted if we could validate them. And many of them are in every single election. So we had to finish up the election. And what I wanted to kind of describe for all of you is how do you do that when you have 1,200 seasonal staff members in that election with the 65 staff members that we had in a building of our size, which is quite large. But when you have that many people and now public health officials saying you have to socially distance for 6 feet, at minimum 6 feet, that becomes a really big task for us to how to facilitate and certify the election on time. Now the governor issued an executive order extending that time frame, but for us, we were already within the depths of verifying and finishing up our work. So we really didn't need the extended time frame, but it was pretty darn challenging to keep everyone safe and healthy. And that was ultimately some of the things that we're concerned about as we get into the November election, is making sure that our staff is healthy all the way through for the remaining 40 days between now and election day, but also the additional 30 days to certify the election. And so we can't have a rash or a spike in any level here at the Register of Voters, so we can actually facilitate and conduct the upcoming election. As we talk really about the pandemic itself and this notion during the primary election, know that also during that time frame, shortly after, the Secretary of State's office formed a task force of elections officials, local elections officials, his office, representatives of the governors, representatives of the legislature, advocacy groups that were out there, to really start talking about the November election, because the state recognized that time was of the essence and something that takes many years and months to prepare for an election of this magnitude for local elections officials. They knew they need to make quick decisions and decisive decisions so that they could proceed forward. So local elections officials like our office could proceed forward and not create any level of confusion or chaos within the election process, knowing that it was, they may have postponed the Olympics, but there was no postponing the actual presidential general election itself. And so there were many debates that was had between all these different groups that I have mentioned to all of you. And ultimately, what I appreciated from the outcome of it was, again, a decisive decision, a quick decision that was made to giving in a lot as much time for us to proceed. Now, there were many disagreements. I don't necessarily agree with everything that was ultimately became policy, but at the end of the day, what I appreciated the most, regardless of the policy, was the timing and the quick action that was taken. And I'll just talk about what those were. So once the policies were in place, we had to quickly form and gather around and figure out how we were going to implement these policies, should we exercise those options. And really, how do we encapsulate our message to voters out there? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, my main message is the top most important, other than conducting a well-run election, part of conducting a well-run election is informing the public about all the changes that will be happening in this upcoming election. And so we set out a certain set of goals that you can see here. And then we also created a logo around the pandemic, as well as the changes that will occur and how voters should be informed and interact with the voting process and their ballot, as every single registered voter will be receiving a mail ballot, and then there will be in-person polling place options, but that is changing, and that's where I see the more drastic changes for our office, even though there's a lot of conversation nationally happening about just mail balloting itself. And I'll talk about mail balloting and kind of where my position is on that, and where I believe mail balloting is in the infrastructure that we have in San Diego County. So we came up with this logo called Vote Safer San Diego. We've placed it on a variety of different direct mailings that we have sent to you. You should have received a direct mailing in early August, giving you a primer of everything that I'm describing, I will describe it, frankly, in much more detail than the mailer that we sent to all registered voters in our county in August of this year. And ultimately, all of this really had to come together. So not just the campaign logo and the goals, but how do we implement and execute in where our world has now been upended. I mean, we've talked about our lives being upended because of the pandemic, and their way of life has changed. Well, now this is another component of that for all of you, as well as extremely for us, as we've had to really internally reorganize, re-engineer our office to change everything that will, to meet the challenges and the changes that we are implementing in this upcoming election and the governor's executive orders. Okay, so what did the state recognize that we needed to really match to that local elections officials were really impacted as a result of the pandemic itself? First of all, it was poll workers. Again, if we conducted the November election traditionally in a neighborhood polling place environment, we would need approximately 9,000 poll workers and 1,600 precincts to be able to facilitate the election in normally how we conduct elections here in San Diego County. And then the second major impact, which are fundamental, both of these are fundamental to any operations related to conducting an election, is the polling places themselves. And the polling places where we use private and public facilities in an election, how do we really facilitate and get and secure enough polling places, physical sites, to do so in a world of a pandemic where, again, you have to understand and recognize and become educated of all the different safety protocols that needs to be in place for voters to vote safely and in a healthy environment. And so that became another questionable item. So poll workers and polling locations became a level of uncertainty. And in our world, you cannot operate and conduct an election in a world of uncertainty. We need to build, if there was uncertainty, we need to build and act decisively to create certainty for our operations. So let me kind of give you it from a numbers perspective. If you looked at the total number of poll workers that assisted us and volunteered their time in the last election, 30% of those individuals are in this high risk category of the 65 plus age group that are high risk and threatened as a result of the pandemic itself. But this is also the largest group of people that serve as poll workers for our office, for the county, for all of you. And then when you look at the other side of the spectrum, you can't really just stop at the 30%. You got to look at the other side of the spectrum. That 20% of our poll workers that are 16 to 19 years of age, what are those voters, not voters, but poll workers doing? They are distance learning right now. These are our bread and butter, if you will, that we generally slot as our technical inspectors, young our folks that we're trying to engage and be civic-minded and help us out in a variety of different ways and responsibilities. Those individuals are now sitting at home, and there's questions about their availability to assist us in a neighborhood traditional precinct election. So when you combine those two numbers, that creates 50% of the population of our poll workers that are now in question. And ultimately, how do we even get off of the first square to be able to facilitate to the tune of the elections to serve that 1.9 million registered voters across the entire county? From a polling place perspective, if you look at the counties and states that conducted their election under the cloud of the pandemic, if you look back at some of those states in the news stories, you would see and hear of situations where polling locations that were being used as polling locations that were private facilities and businesses that were out there. So in certain cases, they said yes when there wasn't the pandemic, and then said no when the pandemic hit, and that created a level of disruption in not just elections administrators' worlds of trying to facilitate their primary election, but also to voters in creating confusion overall. And look at our numbers. 69% of our polling places, our precincts, were reporting to a private facilities, neighborhood garages, pizza parlors, pet grooming stores, funeral parlors. All of these locations are now effectively too small and casts the certainty of doubt in the minds of our ability to facilitate the election. And that you cannot have if you're trying to facilitate an event like ours. So we really had to look at public facilities. We had to look at a different way of modeling out the election, which was part of the second executive order by the governor. The first executive order that he issued in May, early May, was every active registered voter was going to receive a mail ballot. The second executive order was that there was going to be polling places for voters, because there are going to be certain populations that need to get to an in-person or polling place environment. But if you're going to do so, how do you allow for that level of accessibility, but also secure it in a way that elections officials like myself needed to be confident that they would be available for use. Also, that social distancing, locations needs to be at least 2,000 square feet in space to ensure that we can house all of the equipment, our poll workers and voters, and to have as large of facilities as possible to ensure that there's no overcrowding, particularly in a presidential general election. There's always a high surge of people that turn out on election day. So we had to really take that in consideration, particularly as it relates to a pandemic. Geography, the fact that we're 4,500 square miles, 5,000 square miles in geography. We had to take that in consideration about the population density and the socioeconomic considerations, as well as the transportation corridors. The fact that we have rural and urban, a big swath of unincorporated versus cities that are out there. So we had to take into consideration all of that, and not just in terms of accessibility for voters with disabilities, but so many other factors as we were looking to sites that would ultimately become polling places for our office. I've already talked with you about the election structure and the total number of ballot types in this upcoming election, but that is also a factor that we have to consider, because then we can create in precincts out of how many people are having a specific type of the ballot, and then strategically placing the polling place inside or around that precinct in itself. So when you think about this upcoming election, here's really the choices that we had in a nutshell from a policy perspective. And then here you can see how March's election was conducted with the 1,548 precincts, around 9,000 individuals volunteering their time, and the fact that we had a mail ballot drop-off program that wasn't really required by law, but we really adopted that program back in 2014 because we knew we needed to add additional service, even though it was not legally required. That we really did say, let's give voters another option to drop off their mail ballot. And in this past election, in March's election, we grew it to the tune of 62 sites. Many of those are libraries. Frankly, all of them were libraries. And then we did it for a 7-day period, which for us was kind of the sweet spot for voters. And what the data showed is when voters start dropping off their mail ballot and really interacting and getting their ballots through, because there's a sense of urgency now of ballots needing to get back to our office in a timely fashion. So what is November's election going to look like? As I already mentioned, 100% of the active registered voter population is going to receive a mail ballot. That's by executive order. It's going to have a prepaid postage envelope inside of it, and it will have your I voted sticker as well inside of it. And also important information, as you will see when you receive it starting on October 5th, and that's when we're going to start mailing out all of the mail ballots. So voters should expect their ballot showing up the week of October 5th, and perhaps even on October 5th. But we are moving towards option 2 of the governor's executive order, which is the ability to consolidate more heavily our voting precincts. And you can start seeing the red and the blue here about the changes. As opposed to having 1,548 precincts, actually we were anticipating having upwards of more than 1,600 voting precincts that would operate for 1 day. We are now moving towards a model where there will be 235 super poll locations, much larger facilities at public facilities. Many of them are. Only a few of them are private facilities, but they will be open for a 4-day period from October 31st through November 3rd. There's trade-offs. I wouldn't say that there is less locations or less service here. It's just changed in terms of how that service is being provided, where now you have 4 days of getting to your assigned polling location that will be printed on the back of your sample ballot and voter information pamphlet, or you can find on our website. But voters should know that maybe decades, maybe years of them going to and dropping off their mail ballot or voting at their respective polling location has most likely changed in this upcoming election. That's so important for us to get that information out to voters right now, that their polling location in this upcoming election has changed, that instead, though, everyone is going to receive a mail ballot that are registered to vote. The fact here also is that we are creating a much robust program around our mail ballot drop-off location to the tune of over doubling the total number of mail ballot drop-off locations that we had in March. We're now going to have 126 locations for people to drop off their mail ballot, and we will quadruple the amount of time that will occur. So when we send out the mail ballots starting on October 5th, on October 6th, we will have 125 staffed locations that will be operating from October 6th all the way through November 3rd at 8 p.m. And then the 126th location is a drop-off box that is 24/7 that will be located here close to the Kearney Mesa area, in the Kearney Mesa here of the county. And then that poll workers, as opposed to needing 9,000 poll workers, we'll need around 3,500 to 3,600 poll workers. But if you think that that is less, yes, it is less in terms of physical number of people, but these poll workers will need to work and commit to upwards of a 9-day period as opposed to 1-day period. Why? is because to facilitate this super poll location and the amount of equipment and technology that we are going to be placing in every single one of them, we are requiring a 2-day training as opposed to a 2-hour training. And because these super polls will be open for a 4-day as opposed to a 1-day period, you need to, poll workers have to commit to a 4-day period of when we go live starting on October 31st through November 3rd. So that's 6 days. Why is there a total of 9 days? Well, it's because we need 1 day to set up the site, 1 day to break down the site, and then for specific poll workers, they will need to go to that specific site to receive all the voting materials, because now we are doing drayage. If you've ever been as a poll worker for us in the past, if in a specific capacity, you may have needed to pick up your voting supplies 10 days in advance of election day. Well, now that won't occur. We're actually delivering all of the equipment to the respective site for specific poll workers to receive and account for it before we set up it the Friday before October 31st. So October 30th is when poll workers will start setting up all of the 235 sites that are out there. One significant difference of our poll workers, it's really not volunteer any longer. As I mentioned, we need around 4,500 seasonal staff members. Well, those poll workers are no longer volunteers, but paid seasonal staff members of our office. We will be paying a salary anywhere from $14.25 to $18 per hour, just again to provide certainty and commitment that we know we're going to have the individuals participating in serving voters across those 4-day period. And then, as I mentioned, we've launched into that Vote Safer San Diego campaign. Let me just say that this is the most robust and comprehensive voter outreach and education campaign that we've ever conducted here in the history of this office. Why is that? Well, it goes back to the model. You don't change the model, particularly in a presidential election year, on voters. And so, as well as internal organizationally, but here we're doing that, and it's all in response to the pandemic. And so we have done not just radio ads and putting ads in the newspapers and maybe some TV, but we're doing it across the entire spectrum. We're doing TV, newspapers, radio, and not just your normal traditional various TV and radio and newspaper ads. We're doing it across all the other local newspapers as well, and we're doing it across all the required languages. We've always had it in the respective language, but that has even ballooned up more. We will be spending more than $1.5 million on our outreach and voter education campaign, and that's not including doing these types of presentations. I think I'm upwards of almost 50, close to 50 presentations that I've given just myself, in trying to reach out to voters and trying to inform them of all these changes as well. Let's talk really quickly about mail ballots, and then we'll turn our attention more towards the polling places, the in-person, what that's going to look like. I'm not going to go through all these different points, but know that our office has matured with mail balloting. All the national discussion, what is probably disappointing is all the national discussions about the U.S. Postal Service and will they be able to meet the outbound and inbound capacity of delivering voters their mail ballot and delivering it back to our office once the voter has voted it and returned it back to us. That is not in question for me. It may be in question nationally out there, but for me is I have no question and have really all confidence in our U.S. Postal Service to really meet the demands. And not because of this election, is because we've had a long tradition of working with them over decades of mail balloting, because our office in this county and this state has had a rich tradition of voting by mail. Voters in our county, the total percentage of voters that are signed up to be a permanent mail ballot voter is now at 78%. 78% of our electorate, regardless of this pandemic, regardless of the governor's executive order, is already signed up to receive a mail ballot if we were conducting it without the pandemic, without the governor's executive order. And because of that, because of your preferences of voting by mail, we've managed and developed the infrastructure around it. So where there is this national discussion, that's really left for those states and those jurisdictions where they are not mail ballot centric. We are mail ballot centric here in our state as well as in our county. And we've developed all the processes and procedures and chain of custody and security around these mail ballots to ensure that we will be processing them with the utmost security and integrity that we can afford. But if you look at the last point of our mail ballot, if there's a concern about the U.S. Postal Service and of dropping it through the U.S. Postal Service, which again will have a return postage paid envelope inside of it, it is the fact there's a couple of things associated with it. The U.S. Postal Service has thousands of collection mailboxes out there that they go to. They have a much more robust infrastructure than our 126 mail ballot drop-off locations that they pick up daily, other than Sunday that's out there. But if there's even a question about their timeliness, know that the legislature, this last point here, has stepped in and said, if a ballot is postmarked by Election Day and received 17 days after Election Day, it is considered a timely cast ballot. 17 days. They've added an additional 14-day window to what was otherwise a postmark plus 3 situation, what we call postmark plus 3. That is postmarked on Election Day and received 3 days afterwards. Now it's postmark plus 17 that a person can have that, as long as it's postmarked, to have the window of time for us to receive it and consider it as timely cast that is out there. I won't go through all of this because I'll send it to Mike, and Mike can send it to all you in terms of the slide deck so you can read all the various points out there. Let's talk about in-person voting for a split second. We are absolutely encouraging voters to vote safely, vote safe for San Diego, and part of that is voting that mail ballot and returning it through a trusted source. And I'll talk about the trusted source in just a second. But we know that voters, there are going to be voters that need to vote in person. And that's part of the governor's executive order. The fact that there are going to be voters with disabilities that need to have a level of access. We know that there are going to be voters that didn't receive their mail ballot, that now it's too short of a window to get them their mail ballot, and so they need to get to an in-person location. They're assigned in-person location. We know that voters are going to make mistakes on their mail ballot when they receive it, and so therefore they need a replacement mail ballot, and so they need a close location to go to. And then finally, beyond those individuals, you've got individuals that did not register on time by the October 19th timeframe. And so now they need to exercise their ability to register and vote conditionally on at one of these super polls locations, their assigned super polls location during that 4-day window. Those, I would say, are the need to really, it's necessary for them to get to a super polls location. So other than that, we know that voters want to vote at, potentially vote at their assigned polling location because it's tradition, it's part of democracy to go and in-person vote. That is perfectly fine. What we're asking voters to do is highly consider that there is this pandemic out there and to stop the virus from spreading, to stop the crowding, which will possibly, high possibility of occurring should a number of people go out there and vote on Election Day. That's why it's over a 4-day period, is to distribute voters across the 4-day period across these 235 super polls location. What should voters expect if they go there? Well, as opposed to having one check-in station, we will now have 7 check-in station voters that would go there to, again, to create efficiencies of getting voters their ballot quickly, them allowing them to retire in the voting booth, voting it and getting and dropping it inside the ballot box before leaving. So what we're doing in that regard is we're no longer having paper rosters for people to sign into to be able to receive their ballot. Instead, we will be introducing electronic poll books, which we have a level of experience in because we introduced this at all of the 4 satellite locations that we implemented as a pilot in the March election. These electronic poll books are effectively an electronic version of the paper roster, but has much more transparency to them. What I mean by that is it will have all the list of all registered voters in the county, and it will have the list of all the voters that are assigned to that specific location, and it has the disposition and status of that mail ballot that we issue to them. So if Mike decides to vote his mail ballot and then tries to go to a polling place and vote, and we've received his mail ballot and accepted it, and he tries to go to a polling place, the poll workers will see that it has been returned, and Mike's only way of voting at that polling place is through a provisional ballot. Now, conversely to that, if Mike has not returned his mail ballot and we haven't received it, we have now the ability to suspend that mail ballot. If he cannot surrender it, we have the ability to now suspend that issued mail ballot and issue him a regular polling place ballot, so he does not have to vote provisionally. That has not occurred before. So we see the total number of provisional ballots cast in the election to go down in those situations, which is a huge percentage of those that are casting provisional ballots because they could not surrender their mail ballot. Well, now, because of the electronic poll books, we have eyesight transparency of what has been returned, or what has not, of which poll workers have not had that ability before. Also, you will have on average of 15 poll workers there. Normally you see 4 poll workers to a polling location. We will have upwards of 15 poll workers. You will see all the personal protective equipment that you normally see when you go to the grocery store or to any other venue out there, business that is out there. Plexiglass, face shields for our poll workers, masks for our poll workers, masks for voters. We have purchased over 280,000 masks, over 700,000 gloves have been purchased, tubs and tubs and tubs and pallets fulls of hand sanitizers and sanitizing wipes. We have worked with 2 public health doctors to work through the voter flow of the donning and doffing of gloves. When is it appropriate to hand sanitize? When is it appropriate to wear gloves? We have worked through the protocols that our poll workers will need to go through, that they will need to be self-screen their temperature before showing up inside a polling place. We will be doing testing for all of our poll workers should they voluntarily want to do that. So we have created that infrastructure and worked with our Health and Human Services Agency to afford those poll workers to do so free of charge, just so that we can stave off any rash of the pandemic at any one of these sites that would prevent us from serving voters that are out there. And then there's the cleaning protocols of any shared equipment or touching of the equipment from that we will have out there. So all of that is being put together, and there's more that's on this, but ultimately at the end of the day, I want to kind of impress upon all of you is vote safely and vote that mail ballot. And alternatively, if you do need to go to a polling place, certainly do so, but take high regard of voting that mail ballot and returning it through the U.S. Postal Service as our first recommendation. And then our second recommendation is any one of our mail ballot drop-off locations. Why U.S. Postal Service first? Because it's more convenient. There's thousands of these collection boxes that you probably can step outside your door and know where you can drop off any piece of mail, and it will get back to our office. So this is, if you will, the traditional model that you can see here. This is what really the county looks like in a traditional voting precinct model. And in a consolidated, more heavily consolidated precinct model, you can see that what we're doing is based off of what contests are on the ballot, now formulating bigger areas that people would go to. And after we do that, then we can actually strategically cite the physical site themselves. And this is kind of a representation and modeling of that that you can see here. So we will have 235 super polls location. I should say, if we wanted just to meet the minimum, of the law, the total number that we would need is 184 super polls locations. Yet we're going to have 235 sites. Why is that? Well, for us was never about the minimum, was never about the threshold by law. For us was about the data and what has been historical numbers that we can project and anticipate for this upcoming election. So by doing that number crunching and doing the queuing theory of what it's going to take to serve timely voters, is that we needed to add approximately 30% more locations to the overall equation. Now, it's anyone's best guess about ultimately how many people are going to go to a polling location. But if you think about 2016's election, there were over nearly 500,000 voters that went to a polling place and voted. Now, the pandemic will impact that number. The fact that we're sending everyone a mail ballot is going to impact, that's the registered voters, that is, a mail ballot, that'll impact that number. The fact that we are encouraging voters to vote safely in voting that mail ballot and only going to a polling place as an alternative to voting their mail ballot, we don't know what that impact is going to look like. Ultimately, we will see whether or not we will receive voter cooperation, and we will ultimately see voter behavior as this election proceeds. But ultimately, we don't know. And so as a result, we have to do something. And for us, is we have to meet the capacity of that 80% plus turnout that we're expecting. Here's that mailer that I talked with you about that we sent out in early August. It gave you the primer of what was going to be inside of it. We asked voters to verify their residence address as well as the mailing address on that mailer to update that information so that way they could receive their mail ballot, and so there wouldn't be a delay. And then as I mentioned today, the 40th day before, this is what the sample ballot and voter information pamphlet is looking like. Now, we're mailing over 1.6 million, nearly 1.7 million of those ballots, sample ballot pamphlets through the mail, but know that 180,000 voters have signed up to receive this pamphlet electronically as a contactless way of receiving their sample ballot pamphlet. It's a tax-saving initiative that we've pursued, as well as you voters would be able to receive it more expeditiously than waiting for it through the mail. And so we've sent out 25,000 today, and we will ultimately continue to sending all of these sample ballot pamphlets through email to the tune of nearly 180,000 of them, and then the rest will go through the mail. Okay. And then on October 5th, as I mentioned, voters should start expecting their mail ballot to show up in their mailbox. So starting that week of October 5th. Now, let's just talk really quickly about all the voter education campaign that we're doing. Again, we're trying to not overwhelm all of you. And so we have done a series of messages. Be vote ready. What does be vote ready mean? It's checking your registration. Make sure you're registered to vote. And these are kind of all the ads that are out there, digital ads, social media ads, all the creatives that we have created to really send out the messages, whether it's through newspaper or radio that is out there. And then ultimately about the mail balloting side of it, that voters should start expecting it. And what does that all mean? We have actually engaged our high school students, even though many of them are, actually all of them are distance learning, and so they're kind of sitting this one out. But we've engaged them in creating various artwork and pursued them to continue to be civically engaged with our office. And then what are the good practices of voting that mail ballot? That is signing it, the back of that envelope, sealing the ballot inside of it, returning it to a trusted source, clearly marking that that ballot with an ink pen, are ways for you to have good practices, good, if you will, mail ballot hygiene, voting that mail ballot and getting it back to us. And who are those trusted sources? Again, as I mentioned, it's the U.S. Postal Service. It's the 126 mail ballot drop-off locations, and separate from that, the 235 super polls locations that are out there. And then just various designs that we've pushed out to the public to really hopefully resonate for voters that are out there. Okay. And then as I mentioned, everything that we do in English is translated into our four other federally covered languages: Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And I should also mention that we are covered for 4 state covered languages: Laotian, Korean, Arabic, and Japanese, in specific precincts throughout the entire county that we support and provide either take a good faith effort of recruiting poll workers that have those language skills, or and also translate the ballot in those specific precincts in those state covered languages that are out there. As I mentioned, you can take ownership of your mail ballot as well, and that is these two services. The U.S. Postal Service has a service called Informed Delivery. I'm subscribed on one of the 635,000 plus individuals in our county that have subscribed free of charge, where I get a scanned image in my inbox of what pieces of mail I'm going to receive in my mailbox that day. I'm not sure if you're signed up for it, but it's a pretty nifty tool. And so you can find out when your voting material, when your sample ballot pamphlet is going to show up, when your mail ballot is going to show up in your mailbox so you can retrieve it. And then separate from that is we've launched into voters being able to receive through a service called Where's My Ballot. That is the ability to track their mail ballot as it's being delivered to you and getting push notifications by text or email or by voicemail to get notifications of when your mail ballot is traveling to you. And then after you voted it, as it's traveling it back through the U.S. Postal Service, back to our office, and when we've received it and accepted it. It's called Where's My Ballot? Again, free of charge. Go to our website, sdvote.com, and you can subscribe and then start receiving the notifications associated with it. Okay, not going to go through all of these dates because I think I've, for the most part, given it, them to you. October 19th is the registration deadline, and then just know that we have to certify the election by December 3rd. But I've already gone through all these other dates, and these dates you don't need to capture because, again, I'll send it through Mike. I can send it to all of you. Okay, last message. If there was one call to action, if there's one thing that you could do for us, it would be for you to pass this information to all your friends and family and neighbors and other organizations that are out there. That there are part of the Vote Safer campaign is not just relating to vote safer that mail ballot. Yes, that's the utmost of priority for us, but also vote safer because there's security around, you know, returning your mail ballots and what things that you can do to track it, things that you can do to sign and seal and return it to a trusted source that is out there. And then only use the polling places that are out there as an alternative of to voting that mail ballot. When we talk about the mail ballots, I actually recently did today I did a spot with NBC where they came on site and did the life of mail ballots that's traveling through all the chain of custody and what we do to secure that mail ballot all the way through from signature verification, the chain of custody documents that are out there that we do, the fact that we track every single one of these mail ballots that we issue out there. So I would point you to that. That should be on NBC. I think if it's not this Sunday, the following Sunday, but also go to our website because on our website has a great amount of concise, easy to read information about how we protect your votes and how we count those votes accurately. And any questions about any fraudulent activity, what are all the safeguards that we have out there to ensure that we run a well-run election and one that is unimpeachable. So with that said, I will be more than happy to take any questions that you have in what I've said, or maybe that I have not talked about.
Yeah, I've noticed that there are some questions in chat. You might want to look through that.
Okay, so let's see here. When can we first return ballots to the voter of registration office in Claremont Mesa, and what are the hours? Yes, our office, yes. So we will be open starting on October 5th. Our lobby has been closed, but we are actually going to be open starting next Monday. We're going to do a soft opening, and then October 5th, when in-office voting will start, our office will be ready to receive voters and people who want to return their voted mail ballot. So October 5th on that question. And what are the hours? Our hours are going to be from 8 to 5, and certainly on weekends, Saturday, October 31st, as well as November 1st, we will be open as well. So will all the 235 Super Polls locations. On the Monday prior to Election Day, we will be open till 8 p.m. And then, of course, on Election Day, we'll be open from 7 to 8 p.m. Okay? 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. when the polling place hours operate. Let's see here. Is there any chance the Russians will interfere with what you are doing? Let me put it this way. The possibilities are endless. So the question is more of the probabilities. And let me say that from a cyber level, we take a multi-tiered approach to cybersecurity. And it's just not this office. Just know that the conglomerate of the county's infrastructure and all of their resources is at bear here. We are looking at, and there are people monitoring on so many different levels as we are conducting this election. So I have a high confidence that we are monitoring, and if there's any level of intrusion that maybe even had, that it's identified and closed off immediately. And just know that that's constantly happening. The county is constantly looking not just at the vote, our office, but across the entire county infrastructure to begin with. It's almost a little unnerving when the security person of the county says to you, oh yeah, we're monitoring your email traffic that's getting to you. So just know that that's being done. And of course, we do levels of training because one of the things that we've been told time and time again is that the biggest threat is ourselves. That is looking at emails and clicking on specific links that are phishing emails. That's where potential intrusion is. So we have given training to our staff to have them be mindful and reinforcing to them to make sure that it's they're looking at all the ways that phishing emails can come through as well. Let's see here. Okay, I second what Mr. says about the post office. Thank you very much, Janice. Let's see. Yes, Liz, very much so. Okay, so not a question, but, oh, this is Mike, you. Not a question, Lorena Gonzalez follows you. She has announced that she is running for Secretary of State, so you may be working with her in a couple of years. You know what, we are already working closely with one another. We've, you know, she actually sponsored Assembly Bill 1873, which was the precursor to the Vote Center bill. She sponsored that bill, she authored that bill for the county that's out there. And, you know, there's, trust me, there's no question in my mind that if there's ever an issue or she just wants to reach out, that she knows my number and she can reach out to me as well. So yes, I look forward always in whatever capacity that she serves in to have a dialogue of elections that are out there. So absolutely, I think if she does win the contest in 2022, you know, that will be a feather in all of our caps that we have someone local here that is in a state representing us on a statewide level. And I don't think there's any other question that is out there unless there are, or if people want to ask their question verbally.
Michael, could
Yes.
you share your screen so we can see the whole multitude of people again?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Real quick, we do have Lorena Gonzalez here, and I'd love.
Oh, she's on.
So we'd love to give her a quick opportunity to talk about her endorsement.
But we really want to thank you, Michael Vu, for taking the time to talk to us. And we hope to see you again soon after you can relax because the election's all taken care of and you settle back down into the normal routine. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I'm going to stay on because I want to hear the Assemblywoman speak.
All right.
Well, if it's okay, I'll just jump right in. I've been on Zooms all day. I gotta feed my husband who just got home as well. So isn't it great? Isn't it great, to be honest, that we have Michael Vu at the county and always willing, and everybody should know he's always willing to answer our questions. I find that encouraging. Our office has a ton of questions. We always want to make sure we know what's going on, how we're doing it, and what's going on. And he's been a good partner in that. I just wanted to stop in tonight at your meeting and tell you thank you. Thank you for the endorsement of my reelection. It means a lot to me. Thank you for this club. I think we often joke, hopefully it's a joke, that our battles in California are not between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, but within battles within ourselves and the progressives within the Democratic Party and the maybe not so engaged. I'll put it that way. But I'm proud to be a progressive Democrat, trying hard to live our values in a way that really ensure we have progressive leadership, bold leadership on all levels, in particular when it comes to workers' rights, when it comes to environmental rights, when it comes to ensuring that we have a state that we can believe in. So your endorsement means a lot. It's going to be a busy season. I haven't seen your whole list of endorsements. I hope among those is no on Prop 22. It's something we're working very hard on. Yes on Prop 16, no on Prop 22 are the two initiatives among many that I have been able to work on and hope that we will be able to, as San Diego County Democrats as well. So I just wanted to come say thank you. I don't know if there's any questions. I gotta go soon, but if there's a question or two, I'll take it. If not, I just, again, wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lorena. It's really great to see you. And we hope to see you a lot more in the weeks and years to come.
Yay. All right. So switching over, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Marjorie Cohn, Professor Marjorie Cohn. She is a great friend to PDA-CA and to the San Diego chapter of PDA-CA. We love her nearly and dearly because she has guided us through many tough issues on how to move forward. So without further ado, Marjorie Cohn, please.
Thank you. And I also want to say that I'm a proud member of the advisory board of the National PDA as well. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a legendary justice, died shortly before the election. Everyone knows that. The court now has 8 members, 3 liberals, 5 conservatives, and I'm using those terms loosely. Chief Justice John Roberts, although he's very right-wing, he's also mindful of the legacy of the court. And so he actually joined the liberals to make a 5th vote to uphold the Affordable Care Act and to strike down an abortion restriction that was identical to a restriction 4 years before that they had struck down. He believes in stare decisis. He believes in precedent, and he also is really concerned with the legitimacy of the court. So until Ginsburg's death, Roberts had been the swing vote, but a Trump appointment would substitute a solid right-winger for Ginsburg, making a 6-3 majority, which would have the votes to overturn Roe v. Wade, strike down the Affordable Care Act, and decimate the rights of workers, immigrants, people of color, women, LGBTQ people, people with mental disabilities, etc. Trump is rushing, Trump and McConnell, rushing to get a justice confirmed, a right-wing justice confirmed before the election, and if not before the inauguration. And Trump openly says that he wants to fill Ginsburg's vacancy before Election Day so that his justice can help fight the mail-in ballots, because he perceives that the mail-in ballots are going to go for Democrats largely. And of course, we know that this election will not be decided election night. There is, you might have been talking about this already, but there is the danger that the In-person balloting will show Trump leading. Trump declares himself the winner. Fox News declares him the winner, and then all hell breaks loose. And he has said, I think this was yesterday or today, he refuses to commit to a peaceful transition of power. This is all very, very frightening. Now, the Democrats don't really have any hope at all now of stopping him from nominating a justice and from McConnell bringing it to the Senate floor. The Senate is split 53 Republicans to 48 Democrats, and that means that four Republicans would have to oppose it. Murkowski and Collins have already announced that they would oppose voting on a nominee before the election. Romney went along with, following in lockstep with McConnell, and there is a possibility that if Mark Kelly beats Martha McSally in Arizona, that he would be sworn in by the end of November. He could vote and may well vote with the Democrats to keep that vote from going forward. But that means that there's a fourth that doesn't exist. So I think we can rest assured that Trump is going to nominate a woman on Saturday, and that will proceed. And there have been some names that have been bandied about, and the one that I've heard the most is Amy Coney Barrett, who is a member of a kind of a cult. She's a devout Catholic, but she's also a member of a cult that believes that men tell women what to do, and her faith. She has said that her faith, although she's backtracked a bit, her faith is the most important thing in terms of her judging, and she doesn't believe in stare decisis. She has said that the court should invalidate the Affordable Care Act. She called Roe v. Wade a judicial fiat, and she, as I said, has been extremely critical of stare decisis. She ruled against an African-American worker whose employer transferred him in order to segregate the office by race. And the chief judge of the Seventh Circuit, which is where Amy Coney Barrett now serves as a judge, the chief judge described Barrett's position as permitting a separate but equal arrangement. She consistently rules for the powerful and the wealthy over the rights of ordinary people. And she overturned a 30-year precedent that will now hamper the Federal Trade Commission from preventing companies from lying to consumers and stealing their money. And also, she wrote a decision denying consumers the ability to enforce their rights under a federal law against abusive debt collection. She dissented from a Seventh Circuit decision holding a federal law that restricted gun rights for felons constitutional, and Justice Thomas has been champing at the bit to revisit the Second Amendment to expand the rights of individuals to bear various arms. She repeatedly rules against Fifth and Sixth Amendment protections for defendants in criminal cases. She consistently rules against the rights of immigrants. So that's Amy Coney Barrett. And then just briefly, another name that has come up as well is Barbara Lagoa, who is a judge on the 11th Circuit. She's a Cuban American. She was the first Latina woman appointed to the Florida Supreme Court, and she represented the Miami family of Elian Gonzalez, the extended family, when Elian Gonzalez, a 6-year-old boy, was found floating in an inner tube off the coast of Florida because his mother and her boyfriend had basically kidnapped him from Cuba, left his father in Cuba without any notice of that, and his father wanted him back, and Janet Reno, the Attorney General ruled that he should be sent back, and yet the family made this a cause célèbre in the Cuban American community. Eventually he was sent back. He's lived a very productive, wonderful life in Cuba since then. But this would cement Trump's support among Cuban Americans if he doesn't already have that support. He just imposed sanctions on Cuba, which will also go a long way to that end as well. So what can the Democrats do? Well, the Democrats can play hardball. They're not used to doing that, but they can pledge that if Biden wins and the Democrats take back the Senate, that they will expand the number of justices, because Trump will have created a 6-3 right-wing court for who knows how many decades to come. This has been done before. It's been expanded and it's been reduced. The Constitution does not provide any specific number of justices, so it's up to Congress. FDR tried to increase the number of justices because the Supreme Court was striking down his New Deal legislation, but at the last minute, Justice Roberts, who was a right-winger, changed his vote to uphold some of the New Deal legislation. So people say that FDR lost the battle and won the war. And there is, although Biden has been non-committal about increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court, Ed Markey, Jerry Nadler, Chuck Schumer have all come out in favor of it. And another proposal is establishing term limits. There's been a suggestion of 18 years, and they would be staggered so that the court would be expanded in number. Now, there's nothing to prevent a later president and a Republican president and subsequent Republican president and Republican Senate from expanding it even more, contracting it. But we're talking now about what's happening in the near term. Now, in terms of what could happen if Trump does succeed in achieving a 6-3 majority, and even, well, there are a lot of election lawsuits regarding elections, and I think this was discussed here already, how many days after the election each state can have to count ballots, and those are being litigated. Many of them have gone in favor of Democrats. There are others in the pipe. There's also an issue in the, it's a census case. The Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to intervene on whether undocumented immigrants can be excluded when allocating congressional seats based on the 2020 census. And many states sued the Trump administration for discounting undocumented immigrants on the census, and an appeals court blocked the federal government from carrying out that directive. Now, by January 10th, the president has to transmit to Congress a statement showing the whole number of persons in each state and the number of representatives to which each state would be entitled. And the Secretary of Commerce cannot report to the president by December 31st if the Supreme Court decides not to act quickly on this case. So this is a case that the Supreme Court could take up and rule favorably in favor of Trump, which of course would be a disaster if he succeeds in seating a justice and getting a justice confirmed before the end of the year. And also, the Affordable Care Act is pending before the Supreme Court, and a conservative judge in Texas and a 2-to-1 appeals court ruled that if they strike down part of the Affordable Care Act, then the whole thing is unconstitutional. So there are two issues. First of all, whether or not to uphold a provision of the Affordable Care Act regarding the individual mandate. And if they strike that down, does that mean that the whole law is thrown out, or is it severable? In other words, can that part be severed from the Affordable Care Act and the rest of it continue in force? So those are just my my comments. It's not a pretty picture, and I'm sure you've talked about different scenarios that could happen on election night, after election night. You know, and there have been experiments and scenarios by a number of experts showing that if Biden overwhelmingly wins the Electoral College and the popular vote, Trump will make a big fuss, but eventually will concede defeat. But if anything short of that happens, then all hell will break loose. And now that Trump is not making a commitment that there will be a peaceful transition of power, which is something we've all been worried about, who knows what could happen. Now, Mitch McConnell, who's running a tight race on his own, has said, well, there will be a peaceful transition of power, but I'm not sure McConnell has much control over that. So those are my comments, and I don't know if people have any questions or want to discuss it.
Real quick, if I may, I'd like to also give Tim Nader a quick moment to see if there's anything you'd like to add, since you have a little constitutional background as well.
Thank you, David. So I don't really have anything startlingly different to add to what Professor Cohn just said. I wish I did, but our Constitution and our democracy have never been probably in more peril, at least since the Civil War, the way I see it. You know, I mentioned in my earlier comments at the beginning of your meeting that we need judges who are based in fact. And the kind of judges that Professor Cohn was talking about that are being shortlisted by President Trump and that the Senate's going to ram through are not fact-based judges. They're not constitution-based judges. They're ideology-based judges. And that is exactly the kind of thing I was referring to in my earlier comments. And as I said earlier, it's very telling that earlier this year, when in a pair of cases in a one-week period, the Supreme Court upheld LGBTQ rights and told President Trump that he can't unilaterally dismantle the DACA program, the outcry from some of the right-wing political leaders in Washington was they were upset with their own appointees for following the law and upholding the Constitution instead of doing what they were supposedly put there to do, which was to pursue their ideology. So we're at a very perilous moment. Somebody earlier referred to the California courts as something of a firewall, at least for California, and there is some truth to that because California has its own constitution. We can extend protections to our citizens through our constitution that the U.S. Supreme Court might rule don't exist anymore under the U.S. Constitution. There are a number of ways in which, in some respects, in some limited respects, the state government and state courts can still make a difference. But we are in a very perilous moment if Trump and McConnell, I'm not supposed to name those names, I guess, as a judicial candidate, but if certain ideologically oriented politicians are successful in stacking the U.S. Supreme Court with people who are committed to ideology rather than the law. And that seems to be exactly what they've been trying to do ever since Merrick Garland's nomination was blocked.
I'd like to add one thing as well, and that is that we're talking here about the Supreme Court, but it's not just the Supreme Court because most cases are decided at the circuit court level, federal circuit court level, and we're talking about federal judges with lifetime appointments, and Trump has appointed some 200 lower federal court judges, circuit court judges, and court of appeals judges, district court judges and circuit court of appeals judges, and they have lifetime appointments, and they come off of his list, his vetted list by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. Basically, he's outsourcing his presidential role to appoint judges. So he has really set up the courts, not just the Supreme Court with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and who knows who else, but also the lower federal courts as well, where most of the decisions take place, and very, very disturbing.
All right.
Absolutely.
Derek.
So thank you, David. Marjorie, hi.
Hi.
I was told by a UCSD retired professor today that for the Senate to commence business every day when they meet, they have to have unanimous consent to start business. And if one senator, like a Democrat, doesn't give consent, they can't do business for that day. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard that, and I've also heard that that only lasts for a certain number of hours. And I've also heard the suggestion that perhaps they could bring things like, selling arms to Yemen and other kinds of issues to try to clog up the docket. But I think ultimately it's up to McConnell, and he is going to get that debate and that hearing if he wants it. But I've heard that. I'm skeptical.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I see Joan Raphael has her hand up. Next.
Yes, I was wondering, at the end of Obama's term, the Republicans ran with it and did not allow his candidate to even be discussed. Can the Democrats follow that method and stop things? I'm not clear on exactly what they did, but is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. It wasn't at the end of Obama's term. It was 9 months before his term ended.
True.
And yes, and Justice Scalia died, and Obama nominated Merrick Garland, a moderate, as his nomination. It was unprecedented. Mitch McConnell wouldn't even give him a hearing, would not allow the Senate Judiciary Committee to convene to even give Merrick Garland a hearing. And waited until saying that the people need to decide, the people need to vote in an election, because then that president can make the nomination. And sure enough, Trump was elected, and he appointed Gorsuch, nominated Gorsuch. But now, and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and a number of Republican senators said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and we're going to stick to this same game plan, even if there is a Democratic president, or even if when Trump is in office, there's a vacancy that comes open, before the election. Now we're talking 6 weeks before the election, not 9 months before the election. And sure enough, true to form, they, walk in lockstep, I should say goose step, to whatever Trump wants. And they are going to go full speed ahead on it. So they say this is no precedent. And they came up with a kind of a cockamamie distinguishing factor, saying, well, the difference is that the presidency and the Senate is in the same party's hands. So that's a difference. But it's disingenuous is a mild term for what they're doing.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, weren't the Republicans the minority party at that time?
No.
How did they manage to manipulate this? And couldn't the Democrats do the same?
Somebody was going to say something?
Weren't the Republicans the minority party then? And couldn't the Democrats as the minority party pull the same stunts?
Well, the Obama was the president, Democrat, but the Senate was in Republican hands. And the difference now is that Trump is a Republican and the Senate's in Republican hands. And so they're saying that that's the distinguishing factor, which is, hogwash, I guess, is the nice way of saying it.
Okay. I'll go over to Mike.
Yeah, I have 3 questions, sort of. One of them is, am I correct that in order for the candidate to be put into the Supreme Court, it's 50% of the whole Senate as opposed to 50% of the senators who vote? And therefore, if a few Republican senators could be convinced to be sick that day, that would keep it from happening? That's question one. Question two is the first candidate, the woman that you mentioned, who
Amy
you said was,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Amy Coney Bryan.
Yes.
Amy Coney Barrett, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. On ABC News today, at least in their printed version of ABC News, they said that there was a candidate that belonged to a sect, which is, I think, the word you used, where the women were referred to as handmaidens.
Yeah.
Is she the one that they're referring to? It sounds like it.
Yeah.
And the third question is, would you and Tim, for that matter, summarize this whole thing by saying that we're screwed and there's not much we can do about it?
Okay, first of all, yeah, a majority of the senators voting, but the chances of any Republicans not showing up so that the Democrats could, you know, stop this nomination from going forward are, you know, slim to none. I think hell would freeze over first.
But there's always kidnapping.
I won't make any comment about that. Amy Coney Barrett is the member of this. It's not just a sect; it's a cult, where the men are assigned to a head. It's called a head, another man who tells them what to do, and the women are assigned a handmaiden. And this is before the Handmaid's Tale. I think they might be changing the name now because it's got a bad connotation. So basically the men tell the women what to do and they salute and march. And that is Amy Coney Barrett's cult that she belongs to. You pledge allegiance for your life to this cult. There's no other way to describe it. And in terms of whether we're totally screwed, I think that Trump is going to get his nominee through, although if he doesn't get that nominee confirmed by election day and Biden wins, and of course we don't know when that would happen, it's not going to happen on election day, and let's say that Trump gets his nominee confirmed in the transition period between a Biden victory and inauguration day, then I guess theoretically Biden could also propose or nominate a rival justice, and there could be two, and there would be a big mess. So I don't know. I do think, though, the Democrats should commit right now to expanding the number of justices on the court, setting term limits, and if the Democrats take the White House and the Senate.
Thank you.
And Mike, I would just say, I agree. There's very, very little chance of stopping the president's nominee from being confirmed at this point. If Biden wins and is allowed to take office, and it's appalling that we even have to insert that provision into that sentence. And if the Democrats take over the Senate, or the Senate somehow is in the majority of the hands of a majority that supports constitutional rule of law. There are a couple of things they can do. One is, as Professor Cohn indicated, is they can expand the numbers on the court. And personally, I think that would be totally justified under the circumstances. I don't think, you know, the ideologues claim to be originalists and textualists and all of this. There is no way that the founders intended the confirmation process to be manipulated in the way that it's been in the last 4 years. So that would be one option, is expand the court and rebalance the court as if that manipulation had not happened. The other is the Constitution actually gives Congress the power to circumscribe the jurisdiction of the court. And a lot of folks don't know that. So there has been talk that if you have a court that you know, through these manipulations has a majority that is not does not feel bound by the Constitution and is pursuing a legislative agenda of its own, Congress could say, you know, the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction over healthcare issues or over, you know, X, Y, or Z. That was invoked during the Civil War when there was concern. You know, the Chief Justice at the outset of the Civil War was Roger Taney, the guy who wrote the infamous Dred Scott decision. And there was concern that the Supreme Court was so sympathetic to the Confederacy that they might issue rulings that would hamper the war effort. And Congress specifically stripped the court of jurisdiction over cases related to the war effort by the Union. And that authority is in the Constitution. It's one that I think should be used very, very sparingly, because you could imagine some scary scenarios there. But we're in pretty unprecedented territory with the way this group has manipulated the court appointment process, and those are options Congress would have.
When you say Congress, do you mean the House or the House and the Senate?
I believe they would have to both act. I don't think the confirmation of justices is strictly the Senate, but legislation restricting the court's jurisdiction or changing it would be an act of Congress.
Thank you. David, if you're talking, you're muted.
Any other questions? Well, seeing that it's 9 o'clock, I want to thank everybody who stayed to the end to listen to these thoughts that are not the happiest, but very important. But nevertheless, very important that we pay attention to it and look to the future. And again, it's most important that we pay attention to our down ballot races, our assembly, our judges, our city council, and make your choices for those on your ballots for those people to reflect your values to the best of your ability. And then the other thought would be, though we understand that judges are not supposed to be swayed by groups, but we know your heart's in the right place, and we'll give you a shout out and just say, hey, good job when you do a good job.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Professor Cohn. And thank you, Tim, for coming in and being blindsided by us by asking you questions.
No problem. I expect if I win, that's going to happen pretty often.
You can count on it. And also, thank you for not mentioning any names before when you, were.
So we're not supposed to, take positions in a presidential race as judicial candidates, right? I think the folks who made those rules, and I'm not telling you who to vote for. I don't need to, but I'm not telling you who to vote for. But I'm just saying, I think there was a certain, I think the folks who made those rules did not anticipate a situation where an incumbent running for re-election actually questioned whether he would have to turn over power if he doesn't win the election. For example, let's take one of several examples. And this year there's a unique tension, there's a unique tension between the requirement that we stay out of commenting on those races and the oath that all of us have taken to defend the Constitution of the United States. And I have always taken that oath very seriously, whether it was as a councilman and mayor, as a community college trustee, and I still take that very seriously. And I would I'm not going to say who people should vote for, but I will say, think very seriously about who's going to uphold the Constitution and who isn't, because our democracy is in great peril if we have a president who does not believe in the Constitution. But I'm not telling you who to vote for.
We can only guess.
I'm, this is an educated group. I'm sure you can draw the right conclusions for yourself.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you again. I bid you a good evening, and remember to educate yourself and vote well. Educate your neighbors so that they can vote well. And
vote early and often.
Vote early and often. Yeah, get it done. Get it done, Tater.
Just keep doing it again and again.
Sound like Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald?
Well, why not? It's fair.
He said to vote in person and to vote by mail.
Oh, awesome. You guys have a great night. It was good seeing everybody's face, and thank you for the valuable information. And And now I'm going to have this signed, sealed, delivered song stuck in my head all night. Thanks, Michael Vu.
And by the way, this is being recorded and we are going to put it on our, we have a PDA-CA YouTube channel, and we'll let you know how to get to that afterwards. And you can tell those people who may be interested that didn't make the meeting that they have the opportunity to hear from some really great people. So thank you, everyone.
Always great. Have a good night. Bye, guys.
Oh, Liz,
Good night.
one more thing.
Yep.
It's sign, seal, deliver. I'm yours.
Yeah. I know it's in my head now because of Vu. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't pick up that song and why they're not doing ads with that. That's perfect. When you said that, I was cracking up laughing. Awesome.
Right.
Well, I will be your assembly member if you help me. So volunteer, donate. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.